Retro.
Catherine Tabor here, voice of Padmé Amidala from Star Wars The Clone Wars, wishing Jay and Dennis congratulations on 1,000 episodes of Podcast Stardust. And here's to 1,000 more. I have a good feeling about this.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And you may have felt a disturbance in the Force, and that's because we're covering the Clone Wars on a Wednesday, not a Monday. But as we've been saying, we had to shuffle our schedule a little bit to accommodate our 1,000th episode extravaganza, so we didn't want to leave you without an episode in our rewatch, and we're doing it today. But before we get into that, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media?
You got it. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, that is the line. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we are talking about episode 10 from season 3 of the Clone Wars, which is called Heroes on Both Sides. It'll be a full spoiler discussion, as these episodes always are. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the episode summary, please?
Yes, and ironically, this is episode 1001 of Podcast Stardust as well.
Very good.
All right, here we go. A debate concerning deregulating the banks has arisen in the Republic Senate. Deregulation will permit the Republic to get a loan to acquire more clones and pursue the war, but the opposition, led by Padmé Amidala and Bail Organa, desires peace talks. To that end, Padmé recruits Ahsoka to help her get to Raxus, the Separatist capital, to meet with an old friend, Lux Bonteri. There, Ahsoka meets Lux Bonteri, who is the first non-combatant Separatist she has ever met. In the Separatist Senate, a motion to open discussions with Republic passes. However, the Corporate Alliance, who has been pushing for deregulation, convinces Dooku and Grievous to launch an attack on Coruscant, which derails peace talks and propels the Senate towards deregulating the banks and prolonging the war.
So before we started recording, I was telling you offline, it's like, oh, Jay's going to love this one. I know you're fond of Lux Bonteri. And that,
I am.
Yeah. I don't have anything against him. I'm just not as excited about him as you are, but it is an interesting episode. It's another episode that leans more into the political than it does in the action, which has happened a lot this season. It teams up Ahsoka and Padmé once again. So, there's some key points, and we're getting into this whole corruption thing and conspiracy stuff going on with people who are supposed to be loyal members of the Republic, but are conspiring against it or in the name of profit here. A lot of themes to get to, but what did you think about this one overall?
Well, the first thing that stood out to me, I actually see you have it in our notes, is that this is the first time we get to see Ahsoka debuting her new outfit as I would call it her iconic outfit in the Clone Wars up through, season 6, at least at this point. But as you pointed out in our notes, Anakin also has new robes. There's new character models, new wardrobe for Chancellor Palpatine. So of course, for me, that's the first thing I focus on is the wardrobe. But overall, what I really like about this episode is exactly what you just said. Even though it's very politically motivated, it's also an opportunity for an exploration into a little bit of empathy and understanding that there, as it says, at the very beginning and the name of this episode, there are heroes on both sides, and that there are a lot of preconceived notions that are out there. And especially for Ahsoka being so young and only understanding things from one point of view, and the fact that, Ahsoka takes her under, or I'm sorry, Padmé takes Ahsoka under her wing once again and allows her to see the bigger picture, I think is a huge theme in this. And just seeing that there are, in fact, heroes on both sides.
Yeah. here's the thing. If I'm binging this season of the Clone Wars, I'm going to get a little impatient because for everyone, like the last episode we had where it was very action intensive with Obi-Wan and Quinlan Vos, there are these slower episodes. When I'm watching Star Wars, I typically want the more action-oriented Star Wars. But that's not the way we're consuming this season. And so when we're focusing on the single episode, this is an interesting episode because it does what the movies do not. No, it's not any ground breaking revelation that Heroes on Both Sides is lifted directly from the opening crawl, Revenge of the Sith. Dave Filoni even talks about that in the featurette on this. And it is something that they say in the opening crawl of Revenge of the Sith, but they never explore, right? I mean, Heroes on Both Sides will always see villains from the Separatists in the movies. So this kind of like you said, this gives us an opportunity to see into how the other half lives. The other half being the Separatists and the people that are not soldiers or battle droids or General Grievous or Side of Interest and the like. And so that's interesting. As adults watching this, we know that just because there's two opposing sides, not everybody that's on the opposing side is going to be a villain. There's going to be the average civilian, things like that. So the message is, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Not mature is not the right way, but it is something that it's a little bit no duh for us. But to your point, Ahsoka is young. All she's seen is war from the Separatists. So she doesn't have a viewpoint or perspective that affords her the opportunity to look at them as actual people that might have a differing point of view that is legitimate. And so this is a valuable episode for that reason alone.
Right.
But I don't know. The title of this, I'm not sure was the best choice, because when I see that in the opening crawl for Revenge of the Sith, Heroes on Both Sides, I'm thinking the anti-Obi-Wan, the anti-Anakin, right? Their version of the legendary soldier, not necessarily the elder statesman in the Senate.
That's
so
fair.
Not that these people can't be heroes, but perhaps that title could have been preserved for a different story, I suppose.
No, I think that's totally fair. And I think probably what it just gets to is the fact that the heroism is in the idealistic aspect of things.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's these senior statesmen like Mina Bonteri and that type of thing that can be heroes by championing peace and at least peace talks. And then of course that gets just shut right down. But, getting back real quickly to Ahsoka, as you mentioned, it really hit me because she was just offhandedly talking to Anakin and Padme as they were walking down the hallway. Well, the Separatists are evil. I mean, that was just her,
They started this
boom.
war, right?
Yeah, they started this war. The Separatists are evil. And that
Mhm.
was her only viewpoint into that side of things until, of course, she met Mina and Lux.
Yeah. See, here's the other thing I have a problem with this title, Heroes on Both Sides. The people that are being traded, the heroes, never get recognized as the heroes. Why? Because although their argument may have prevailed in the Senate, then it got completely undermined by Dooku authorizing the attack of these maintenance droids on the power generator on Coruscant that derails everything. So there's no lasting memory of them being heroes for anything that happens in this episode.
True.
Okay. Well, we got a lot of things to talk about, and I'm hoping to keep this in less than 30 minutes because I got a lot of editing to do. But from this past week, this is an interesting timing on this. We just have finally gotten away from the story arc, which we had a couple episodes that preceded the season 1 finale, and now we've had a couple episodes that were after the season 1 finale. But here we are in season 3. And not only that, this episode precedes something that happens in episode 2. So this is not the most current thing that happens in the Clone Wars. And they make sure to point out in the trivia guide that after this, there's not so much jumping around. It's just kind of like we had a bunch of stories to tell, and then we figured out we liked those stories so much we wanted to tell more about that story. And now we got that out of our system. You can count on things being a bit more linear going forward. It's if you didn't know where this one, if you didn't know anything about that, I don't think you would be hurting anything. This story works kind of wherever you tell it for the most part.
It really does. It's kind of
Mhm.
a nice, tidy little, beginning to end kind of chapter within the Clone Wars.
Mhm. But the other thing is this is the second episode of an Ahsoka Padme team up that we've had in 4 episodes. Episode 7 from this season was Ahsoka and Padme going to Alderaan for the conference on what to do with
Mhm.
refugees and the like. And that's after Ahsoka had all those visions of Padme being assassinated. And then, of course, she ends up confronting Aurra Sing. And now this is the sisterly bond that the two of them kind of develop part 2 on this. Uh, Nothing against it, but it is just kind of a, could you not have moved this episode somewhere else to give that a little bit of space to breathe? Give us more Obi-Wan, give us more Anakin, because last week Obi-Wan was a big player, but that's the first time he's had a big role in like 5 or 6 episodes,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
he does not appear in this episode. And once again, Anakin is relegated to a supporting player in this
Mhm.
episode.
Mhm. And being a very angry master, and when it's all said and done as well.
Yeah,
But
but
you know what? One of the things about this, though, that really makes me kind of, pine for the what ifs of Star Wars is that I really feel like if Padme had survived and Order 66 had not happened and Ahsoka stayed with the Order, and that even though Anakin and Padme's relationship would have still perhaps remained obviously secret,
Mhm.
Ahsoka would have made such a great aunt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we get a little bit of that from the Book of Boba Fett, right? That
We
scene that she
do.
has with Luke Skywalker. I mean, she intercepts Din Djarin, and when he asks, "Who are you?" she says, "A friend of the family." There, and you
Right.
can see that.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
kind of see that familial pride in Ahsoka. There, she wants to be around and to give Luke a little bit of auntie advice and the like, but
Yes.
she also gets out of the way in that. But,
Yeah.
I just had to crack up at that one part in the episode where I can't remember exactly what it is Ahsoka says, and Padme says, and Ahsoka's response is like, "You and Master Anakin, like, talk, think the same way. I can see why you 2
Yes.
get along so well."
You
And the
think
look on
alike.
Padme's face right afterwards, which is, yeah, that's why we get
Mhm.
along so well. Yeah,
Yeah.
almost like getting the cat out of the bag. Surprised you didn't figure it out sooner, Ahsoka,
Right.
but,
Well, she's still young, you know?
mhm. So this is this is not an untimely discussion from when this episode debuted. This whole deregulating the banks, and that was not too far off the housing crisis that we had back in
Mhm.
the early 2000s, the aughts, in the 2000s there. And so I don't know how much that would have landed with kids. And frankly, when I watched this episode at the time, it kind of went right over my head as being anything that might be relevant. But having read a bit more about that time period and what happened, like with The Big Short and stuff like that, books like that that have been very influential and such that, yeah, this notion that you're just going to deregulate the banks so that they can determine what interest rates they want. I mean, this is the unsaid part, but when you just say deregulate the banks, I don't know how much that means to anybody, but the institutions that are handling everyone's money and are supposed to safeguard everyone's money, and it's just that we need a loan so bad to buy more clones to throw into the meat grinder of the war, we're just going to get them free reign. It's I, I feel like like I said, I like this episode. They probably could have spent another minute explaining why this was so controversial and why deregulating a bank could be a bad thing.
Mhm. Well, yeah, they needed to fund their war machine. I mean, that was the big part of that, and, everyone got so desperate at the end because of the bombing at the
Mhm.
Senate that they just had this sort of panic knee-jerk reaction, like, "Oh, yes, we have to do this, we need
Sure.
protection," kind of thing, and they didn't think the long term, what does this actually mean for the everyday Joe in the galaxy?
Yeah. But I guess my point is as simply as this. It's that, well, why does the bank have to be deregulated to give you another loan?
Mhm.
in the
Mm.
situation.
Mhm.
I mean, if
Mhm.
what is the fact that they're being regulated, that there are safeguards in place, that there's people honoring the books, that they are making sure that they are maintaining the proper ratio of cash on hand versus cash rate loaned out. Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a economics lesson because one, I'm ill suited for it, but two, it's not exciting. But it just basically, this episode presents deregulation is, from Padme's experience, is bad. Well, why? And it's, getting Clone Wars from the newer clone troopers from their side, besides just, we can better fight this for, is good. There's not a lot of discussion around that. And it's simply argument by proxy that you have these characters, the Lot Dodd, senator for the Trade Federation, you have the banking clans representative, the techno unions representative. And we all know from having seen the Attack of the Clones that some of these guys, of these organizations, were funding the Separatists. So, but that by itself is what makes it bad. There's
Mhm.
not really, there's no other real explanation about why these things are problematic in this galaxy.
Mhm, and plus, from the very beginning, Padme was against the Military Creation Act for much more than just economics. It
Mhm.
was a lot of that was also for humanitarian reasons and just for preventing war in general and for keeping peace.
Yeah.
So it goes well beyond, the financial. And of course, she's seen what the financial can do when it's not regulated properly from just her time on Naboo as well.
Yeah. Look, I realize this movie has got basically 22 minutes in this movie. This episode's got 22 minutes in order to tell its story, much like the
Mhm.
Phantom Menace basically had 2 hours to tell its story. And taxation of the trade routes is in dispute. Well, no one really tells us what the dispute is or why there's a dispute or why it's so bad that the Trade Federation is willing to starve an entire world. And you don't have to know those things necessarily to understand it, but it is one of the criticisms of this era of Star Wars storytelling, is that if you're going to make these political things so important, perhaps give us a reason to care,
Mhm. Mhm.
because, hey, we're fans of Star Wars. Give us more clone troopers so we can see more battles, right? That's one of the things we're signing up for.
Right.
Um, anyway, but of course, the whole notion of deregulation gets tabled so that they can, because it doesn't have enough support yet, they got other things to do. Meanwhile, to kind of revisit something we talked about, outside the Senate rotunda, Padme appeals to Anakin to talk to the Jedi, to talk to Chancellor Palpatine about maybe sending out peace overtures. And she's like, and Anakin's response is, nope, it's not the Jedi's responsibility to get involved and things like that. What is he
Famous last
saying?
words.
Well, okay, but aren't the Jedi guardians of peace in the galaxy? I mean, isn't that not what Obi-Wan tells us in A New Hope there? So if the Jedi could talk to Palpatine about maybe pursuing peace, isn't that exactly what the Jedi should be doing?
Mhm. And I think at this point, also in the Clone Wars, there's such a gray area in terms of, what truly is the role of the Jedi at this point.
Mhm.
But, what I was getting at, famous last words, was, of course, by the time Revenge of the Sith rolls around, everyone and their brothers trying to get Anakin to talk to Palpatine about this, that, and the other.
Right. No kidding. Yeah. Yeah. But the other thing is that I can't help but wonder if it's just the Anakin, you know, does he believe that, or it is Palpatine's a mentor, and he does not want to say something to get crosswise with him.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And
I'm
that's,
sure
yeah.
that's part of it. Big
Right.
part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So the episode, okay, it's kind of funny. We were just talking about this whole relationship between Padme and Ahsoka. And of course, they had the earlier team up with the whole thing going to Alderaan here. But the three are walking through the Senate Rotunda. And I get it. Ahsoka is young. And, she makes that oblivious comment about, I can see why you two get along so well, without putting two and two together here.
Mhm.
But just the familiarity between Padme and Anakin at this point, of like all the people, Padme walks up to Anakin and is like, appeal to Chancellor Palpatine. And then it's just oh, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Teach my apprentice about politics. It is like the mom and dad argument in front of, you know,
Yes.
Anakin's daughter, Padmé's stepdaughter, is essentially the familiarity there. And Ahsoka just is like, she's not picking up on this. And
Mhm.
I don't want to call her oblivious because she assumes that her master is following the Jedi code, would not be married to Padmé or anything like that. But it's just, I wonder, at some point after she left the Jedi Order or, around the time of A New Hope, she looked back on these moments as like, how could I have been so blind? It was right there in front of me.
Exactly. And as you just said, she's just a young Padawan at this point. She's a lot younger than we give her credit for, or we remember her being, in this way. But it's all she's ever known, and
Right.
so this is not for her, it's just a day at the office. She doesn't know that other Jedi and other senators are not talking to each other in this way. She just knows that Padme and Anakin and Obi-Wan, and all of them have had kind of a closer relationship than, maybe the norm. And so there's a line that they're willing to cross that maybe other senators and Jedi are not.
Right.
Mhm.
So Padme hatches a plan, which is she wants to go to Raxus and find Mina Bonteri, an old friend, an old mentor, and, maybe plant the seeds that would germinate and turn into a peace discussion between the Separatists and the Republic. However, the problem is that she can't do it. It's illegal for her to have any contacts with the other senators, which I can both understand that you need one unified political voice coming out of the Republic to actually get something done to not undermine whatever efforts the chancellor is making. But at the same time, it's like, if there's an opportunity to pursue peace, why shouldn't anyone take it? That
Right.
aside, she says, well, she finds the loophole. Ahsoka can go wherever she wants because she's a Jedi. And Anakin just said that Ahsoka should learn politics from her. So we'll go to Mandalore, which is a neutral world, and then take a shuttle to Raxus, which is exactly
Perfect.
what they do. And then they catch up with Mina and her son Lux on this.
Yes, and 2 things about that is,
Mhm.
number 1, when you pointed out that they made it illegal to talk to separatists because it kind of, quote, unquote, "legitimizes" them if you open
Mhm.
up those talks. So, as you said, it's understandable that you don't wanna undermine, what's going on, but then again, if you prohibit talking from happening, how are you ever going to have negotiation? So
Right.
there's that. And then the second thing was all I could think of, is that this is the same kind of thing that Padme pulled when she was on Tatooine with Anakin, or when she was on Naboo with Anakin, and Anakin says, "Oh, but I have to stay on Naboo with you," and she said, "No, you were sent to protect me. I'm going to Tatooine. So if
Yeah.
you want to come with me, you can
Geonosis,
come with
but
me,"
yeah.
or Geonosis, yes,
Yeah.
that you can come with me. They were on Tatooine. So, yeah, this is the exact same kind of thing that she pulls with that, finding those loopholes, as you said.
Yeah. She's incredibly smart.
Oh,
So
yeah, for sure.
yeah. Now, here's the thing. What she did there is arguably legal. There was no law that was preventing her from going to Geonosis. But she basically, it's not even a gray area. She violated the law here. And the thing is that she counted on her relationship with Palpatine at the end when there's this whole notion of, hey, let's put this up for a vote with the Senate because I've got it on good authority that the Separatists will be interested in peace talks. Well, how do you know this? Can I talk to you in private?
Mhm.
I was there. How I set this up is not important, but it is important that we do it. Palpatine's got that over her. And yeah, I mean, she went out on this limb to do this. But to backtrack here, they go to Raxus. And I know this is a planet that also gets visited by the Bad Batch when we get to, I think, season
Yes.
2. And when we hear Raxus, it just jumps out at us because Raxus Prime was a planet that showed up time and again in various Legends video games set during the Clone Wars. In fact, Dooku had an entire gigantic machine that may have or may not been imbued with the Force that you had to destroy in a video game. There is a junk planet, which this is clearly not. And the episode guide is very non-committal about how Raxus and Raxus Prime may or may not be related, but it does point out they're clearly different planets because this one's not covered in junk. So, yeah, if you heard of Raxus before, that's why. But we
There
get
you
a
go.
chance to see the Separatist Senate after Padmé consults with Mina, and they have a somewhat similar discussion as what happens in the Republic. The difference is that Dooku is appearing by hologram, and he's going through all the appropriate protocol, but we all know, well, I guess it's not all that different. Chancellor Palpatine, who's Darth Sidious, is in charge of the Senate.
Yep.
So you have the two Sith Lords in charge of this, going through the protocols, paying lip service to everything that's going to happen. But then when they don't get the result they want, they manipulate things in the background.
Yes. Yeah, and it's so ironic because, like you said, you've got both Sith Lords manipulating both sides of the coin here and making everyone else their little puppets in the process. And I thought, to myself too, I get it that Padme and Ahsoka wanted to be present for the vote when Mina was, promoting this to the rest of the Senate. But then I was sitting there thinking to myself, okay, yeah, so they had hoods on. What if Dooku saw them both sitting there?
Right.
What would he have thought? You know what I mean?
He calls on them.
Yeah.
What would the
Oh.
senator from Naboo think about all this? I could just see the
Yeah.
eruption there in the Senate. But okay,
Oof.
but it is a cool parallel that we've got, and see, I get it. The heroes from both sides shows up in the crawl, but I think there would have been another. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but there would have been another way of still getting that idea across that these are peoples on opposite sides of a dispute, but they have similar ideals, which is,
Mhm.
the Republic is believed to be corrupt by the Separatists, and so that's why they left. That their needs weren't being addressed. Meanwhile, the Republic looks at it like we are a nation, so to speak, much like the Civil War here in the United States. You can't leave. It's disrupting the common good. You're being led by corrupt individuals, and you've attacked some of our worlds. So there's legitimate disputes on both sides to this. That's cool to see.
Mhm.
But for the sake of time here, let's talk a little bit about Ahsoka and Lux on this. I remember seeing interviews with Dave Filoni and Ashley Eckstein present, and him explaining this whole relationship. And Ashley's, and there was episodes that didn't air that were supposed to happen to this, and Ashley gets like very teared up, and her response was like, "For one moment, Ahsoka had a boyfriend here,"
Yeah.
which is what a lot of people get out of this. The thing that always strikes me funny when I see this is that Ahsoka's got all these doubts about Separatists, but then she's walking by Lux at one point, and he's like, "You're a Jedi, aren't you?" And he's like, "I never met a Jedi." And he talks about how the Jedi are getting faulted by the Separatists for this war, and she says, "Well, look at me, I'm not so bad, am I?" And so he kind of looks at her, this approving look on on his face. She's like, "Well, boys are all the same." And I'm like, "You just asked him to check you out. You
Exactly.
cannot be upset about this, Ahsoka."
Exactly. I think she probably thought, "Oh, boy, he really took me up on that." I didn't
Yeah.
think he would necessarily. So yeah, obviously there's a little bit of flirting there, but yeah, it's kind of funny because of course we know that Ahsoka knows it's never gonna go anywhere anyways because the whole like attachment thing and non-Jedi being, with all the things. But it's still cute to see nonetheless, seeing her working out those teenage kind of, hormone feels
Right, especially
crack me
since
up.
this is the first episode in her new model where she has definitely gotten older and matured some.
Yes.
She's
Uh-huh.
not as quite preteen looking anymore.
Mhm.
And so it's all to say that they really did. I think you put it right. They really are leaning into hormonal teenager for her, meeting another hormonal teenager on the opposite side.
Right.
It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet to a degree there.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep. And not the last time that we'll see Lux and Ahsoka team up.
yeah, indeed. Okay, so this whole arrangement, you've got both sides, the senates for both sides, independently deciding that some peace negotiation needs to have. And this is good news for everyone except for this corporate alliance who needs the war to go on so they can make more money. And they're very upset. So they ask Dooku and Grievous to arrange something to make sure this doesn't happen. And that is that these undercover sanitation droids show up, slaughter everybody in the power generation station, and then blow it up to knock out the power in Coruscant, which is very clear the separatist attack and destroys any opportunity for a peace negotiation. on that. I got to say, one of the things I appreciated is that, Lot Dodd, we all know he's slimy and that
Mhm.
no matter how much he protests in the Senate, he is a separatist. He is in cahoots with Dooku and everything that's going on to prolong this war. And it's all in the name of profit. But somehow they don't come off as just the Saturday morning mustache twirling villain in all of it. Their greed is forefront, but I don't know how to say it. Am I making sense to you on this?
Yes.
What did you
Yes.
think about the way they were portrayed?
Well, and here's the thing too, there's a little bit of history, obviously, with all of this as well, with the Neimoidians, for example, and Padme, because there was even the conversation towards the beginning where they're talking about this and who was it that said, oh, I know someone that could eliminate her for us, meaning Padme, and Lot Dad says, oh, I think you'll find that to be a little bit more difficult than you than you think.
Yeah, right.
So so there is that kind of reputation that precedes her sort of thing, but it is a lot more diabolical feeling than, as you said, the mustache twirling kind of villains. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they were willing to, basically, sacrifice people and just Coruscant in general, and saying, well, Coruscant hasn't been attacked in so many years, and well, this is the perfect time to do it. It will create panic in the whole, all of this. And I have to say, I loved these sanitation droids turning into like the Transformers and doing all the things. That was
Hmm.
cool.
Oh yeah, the triple changers. They went from sanitation
Yeah,
droids to battle droids to
to
bombs.
bombs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll limited a little bit about how much action there wasn't in here, but that was a very horrific way for I mean, these poor guys just doing their jobs, and all of a sudden the
Hmm.
droids show up and slaughter all of them there.
And again, in a
But
kids show, as we've said before,
yeah,
it's a very violent end to their careers there.
right. But then we get to see the conspiracy on full display with these guys. So
Hmm.
the vote fails to negotiate peace with the separatists, and then they immediately move to deregulate the banks because the war is going to go on. And um I mean, no Senate moves that fast. We've seen that time and again, but
No, it's true.
again, you got it, for the sake of a 22-minute story, it has to happen that way, and that's fine. So it's a loss for Padme and stuff like that. But the one moment that we get at the end of this is that you get the first instance of Ahsoka seeing the flaws with everything that's going on with the Republic, with the Jedi, and everything like this. Before she went into this a true believer in the Jedi cause and what the Republic was doing, that the Separatists were evil. They started this war. We've got to defeat them and preserve the Republic. And now she meets Lux and his mom, and she sees that things aren't so black and white, that,
Mhm.
they are people over there, which I think this is like the first step on setting her down that path to leaving the Jedi Order eventually.
Oh, yeah, definitely, and this is just another type of leap in her character arc overall, which is so important.
Hmm. Indeed. All right. Well, I think we've covered most of the big points here of this episode. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
I think we've pretty much hit on everything, and I really appreciate, being able to revisit these episodes, as I always say,
Mhm.
but, again, just seeing the way that things are evolving and the characters and everything, and some really great story beats in this one, so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I find myself with this season, it's like it's a lot of episodes that I don't make a point of watching, but now that we're doing them for this sake of individual analysis, I'm like, wow, I really enjoyed that more than I thought I did.
Mhm.
But I also find that with some of the books we talk about, that's just one of the best things about this podcast is when we really sit down and break down the content. It's you find more things to dig into, and it's always been a lot of fun. So
Yes.
okay. Well, then, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our ongoing Clone Wars rewatch. And this episode, which is called, Heroes on Both Sides. Hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll be back next week with more discussion of the Clone Wars. So if you want to make sure you get that downloaded automatically for you so you don't forget, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We would love it if you could rate and review the show while you're at it. That helps the algorithms and get us in front of more people. And then if you want to catch more episodes of the show and more of our discussions of the Clone Wars, you can head over to retrozap.com, and all of our discussions are there. Most podcatchers are only going to give you the last 200 or 300 episodes. So, that RetroZap site is a good place to catch everything we've done. I mean, including our last episode 1000, where we were just kind of celebrating the legacy of the show on such a momentous episode. But Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found online?
Absolutely. So you can always find us on our Instagram and Facebook social media pages, which is at Podcast Stardust, very conveniently. And we also have all of our fun Pinterest boards set up, so you can check those out. And if you're looking for alternate places to listen to the show, you can hit us up on both of our YouTube outlets, which include the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. And if you'd like to drop us a line, you can do so at podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we also have our TeePublic store where you can pick up some Podcast Artist swag, and every one of those purchases does help to support the show. So if you'd like to do that, just hit up the link in our show notes.
All right. Why don't you catch everyone up on what you got going on in cosplay?
All right, so you can catch me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. So I do actually do Ahsoka from seasons 3 through 6 of the Clone Wars. So this exact costume model you can see on my Instagram pages, as well as all of my other appearances as well. And I also do several other Star Wars characters, including Hera and the Fourth Sister and my original concept Mandalorian.
Okay, upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll be catching up on the week's Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we'll be back with the Clone Wars as we get back into our regular weekly schedule. So make sure you stick around for that. All right. Thanks for listening to episode 1001 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be